All right, it's that time. The clock is ticking. Let's make a 53-man roster. Let's just jump right into it. It is the locker room. Be sure to swarm the like button. Just got out of the Zoom with DeMeco Ryans. We'll hear what he has to say about the decisions. We've also already gotten some cuts, which I don't really like. This was a common cut.
Them bricks is way too high. You need to cut it.
So the Texans have already released. They released Dieter E. Could be practice squad. McTelvin A. and Jacob Phillips. They're gone. They were not on my 53. And here's the background to my 53-man roster. And get your comments in. Be sure to subscribe, like, right along. We'll get into these John Mechie trade rumors as well from the Starbucks baby. I really don't listen when the Starbucks baby puts out reports. That's just me. Some people do. I really don't. I think John Mechie's safe. I don't see any reason to trade John Mechie. But let's get into the 53. Just a couple of guidelines with my 53-man roster. I'm not going to predict who's going to be on IR. I'm going to put together a 53-man roster. Now, we know DeMeco Autry is going to be suspended, so we can throw him to the side. But I'm not going to predict who's going to be on IR. I'm going to put the best 53 on, and then whenever they do injury reserve and all that type of stuff, then we can adjust accordingly. But let's just get right into it. I'll pull up the 53-man roster right here, and I have it blacked out. So I have 2 quarterbacks on my 53-man roster, and we'll start with that. We have C.J. Stroud and Davis Mills, which means Case Keenum does not make the team. Now, this could be an interesting scenario, and who knows how they're going to handle it. But I have C.J. Stroud and Mills as my quarterbacks. So C.J. Stroud, Davis Mills, who knows how they handle that third quarterback. Spoiler alert, if you go down to your third quarterback, you're screwed. And I don't know how much Case Keenum has. Now, there was a final spot where maybe you could go in a different direction and keep 3 quarterbacks because of the value of Case and the fact that they've trusted him in certain situations. But I kept Stroud and Mills, so I only kept 2 quarterbacks. Now we go to the running backs, and this one's a polarizing one. You'll hear my question to DeMeco Ryans about Dameon Pierce. But here's my running backs. My running backs, I am going with Mixon, Akers, Dare, and Pierce. So I'm keeping 4 running backs. Now, is this going to be set in stone? I don't know. A lot could change. I think you would be crazy to cut Akers. I think that would be absolutely foolish. But I do think that you keep Mixon, you keep Akers. Dare is safe. And then Dameon Pierce, who knows if he's on the team at the start of the season, but on the initial 53, I'm keeping Pierce. So we have 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs. Now we go to the fullback. And I don't know that this team needs a fullback. I think there's a chance that we may be overestimating the importance of keeping a fullback. And that's why I asked DeMeco Ryans this question today. You'll hear that in a sec. Andrew Beck, is it possible that Cade Stover can develop into just as good out of the backfield as Andrew Beck? I think it's possible. But just for the sake of this exercise and based on the fact that they trusted Andrew Beck last year, I'm going to keep Andrew Beck on the roster. So we're going to keep a fullback. How important is it? And do they even need a fullback? I think it's a fair, valid question when it comes to Nick Caserio and DeMeco Ryans' decisions. Do they need a fullback? All right, now we're going to go to wide receiver. This one's kind of cut and dry. We've been asking about Robert Woods. We've been talking about Hutchinson and Mechie a lot. At wide receiver, we're keeping 6. We're keeping Diggs, Collins, Dell, obviously. Noah Brown, who's been a little bit banged up. And then we're keeping Mechie and we're keeping Hutch, which means no Steven Sims and no Robert Woods. Now, if someone starts out on IR, I could see a scenario where either one of those guys are there. But we're keeping Diggs, we're keeping Collins, we're keeping Dell, we're keeping Brown, we're keeping Mechie and Hutch. So those are our skill position guys. That's 13 roster spots, 13 of the 53. So we have 40 roster spots to fill up the remainder of the roster. Wide receivers, Dell, Collins, Brown, Mechie, Hutchinson. Tight end, this was the easiest thing. Anything other than what they do here would be an absolute shock. Tight end is the most certain position right now. You know you're keeping Schultz, you know you're keeping Jordan, and you know you're keeping Stover. Now, how much do you use Stover potentially in the backfield? That's TBD, but the tight ends, that was really easy. Now, how many offensive linemen do they keep? That's the question. You have a couple guys with durability issues. The depth is okay. I actually kept 9 offensive linemen, which might be too many. I kept 9 offensive linemen, and the offensive linemen, and I think they're going to be on the streets for offensive line. I think they're going to be on the streets for defensive line. I think they're going to be on the streets for corners. The corner situation kind of terrifies me when we do this exercise outside of your top 2. All right, so offensive line, I kept Tunsil, Howard, Juice Scruggs, Kenyon Green, Shaq Mason, Kendrick Green, Jared Patterson, Broker, and Irving. And I kept Irving because he's played pretty much every offensive line position. So if you find yourself in an emergency situation, you keep him. Maybe you can find someone like that on the streets. But how many offensive linemen do they keep? I think that's a fair question. Defensive end. I actually kept 5 defensive ends. And this one might generate controversy. Who knows what they actually decide to do, but that's what I kept. So I kept Anderson, Hunter, Barnett, Hughes, and Gay. I thought Ali Gay did a good job in the preseason. I thought there was some development, and I like the possibility of him developing into a pretty good player. We also know they like to rotate a lot of guys. We also know that you're going to get Autry back. But I think he was good. I think you can use him in certain special team situations. So I kept him on the squad. So that's my 5 defensive ends. Defensive tackle, a little bit thin there. But I kept 4 defensive tackles, and I think they're going to be on the streets for this. And you can see right there, I put in yellow streets, which means that they're going to have to work. I mean, Nick Caserio and DeMeco, they're going to have to be out on the streets figuring this out. I kept Fatukasi, I kept Edwards, I kept Davis, and I kept Heinisch. Heinisch just survives, doesn't he? He might play here for 30 years. It's amazing how many times that guy's been counted out, and he still hangs around. So I kept Kurt Heinisch. Linebacker. Let's go to the backers. Christian Harris. Again, I'm not predicting injured reserve. I'm not. If I'm putting the best 53 until we know for a fact that a guy's going to be out. I'm not predicting those types of injuries. It's not some sort of moral thing. It's just whenever they tell us, and they adjust. We can talk about guys who are on the bubble, and maybe those guys tend to be there. Again, Fatukasi, Edwards, Davis, Heinisch on DT. LB, we're going Christian Harris, Aziz Al-Shair, Henry To'o, Hanson, Mbop, and Neville Hewitt. Those are your linebackers. 5 linebackers there. And Christian Harris, there's a chance that he could end up on IR, and then they'll adjust accordingly, and we'll adjust accordingly and react to it. Next position, we're going safety. We're keeping 5. We are keeping 5 safeties. So we're keeping, obviously, Jimmy Ward, Jalen Petrie, Eric Murray, Kalen Bullock, and MJ Stewart. The MJ Stewart thing could be interesting. I know they love him on special teams. How do they feel about MJ Stewart? Could they find some sort of upgrade there? How do they feel about that? But we kept MJ Stewart. So that's where we're at. We got 37, 38, 41, 43, 6, 7, 13, 16, 25, 30, 34, 39. So we're 44 left. We got 9 spots for the corners and the specialists. And we know who the specialists are going to be. Spoiler alert there. So your safeties are Ward, Petrie, Murray, Bullock, and Stewart. The cornerback position, this is how I would summarize it. Stingley, Lassiter, and Dam. The depth at corner is terrifying. It is absolutely terrifying. Now, it's great to feel good about your top two corners. You can find guys on the streets, but the cornerback depth is terrifying. Maybe some of those guys are more special teams guys. I know Desmond King is kind of the polarizing guy that's generating a lot of discussion. Here's my thing. I would have loved to felt comfortable enough to get rid of Des King, and maybe they do. I just couldn't make myself feel that way. I know a lot of people don't want to see him on the outside. I agree with that, but I mean, I don't know that there's better alternatives. Maybe they feel different and they've earned the credibility of that, but DeMeco, Caserio, they got to be on the streets at the cornerback position, because even the guys that you brought in as kind of projects, they've been unable to stay healthy. But I kept 6 corners, and yikes. And you can see the streets right here. They need to be out on the streets figuring out what they're going to do with these corners. I kept Stingley. I kept Lassiter. I kept Okudah. Don't know how healthy he is. I kept CJ Henderson. I kept Miles Bryant. And I kept Ross. So I ended up getting rid of King. I don't feel comfortable with it, but I did it anyways. I kind of talked myself into it last minute. Wasn't going to do it. Might want to have him on standby. We might have a remix of last year where he gets released, but I did release Des King. Don't know if I feel great about it or not, and I don't know how they feel. We did see him out there in the preseason, so I kind of juked y'all on that. I did get rid of Des King. And in the special teams, we obviously know who those guys are. It's going to be John Weeks, who ain't never going to die. It's going to be Tommy Townsend, and it's going to be Kayami Fairbairn. So there's your 53-man roster. I anticipate they're going to be out in the streets quite often, but that's just kind of where we're at right there. That's where we're at, 53-man roster. Appreciate everyone for coming through. We'll hear from DeMeco Ryans in a second. He had some interesting things to say, including a question about the fullback position, and we'll hear what DeMeco had to say about that real quick, and then we'll go to everything he had to say. I thought there were some good questions today from the media types, but here was DeMeco Ryans. I asked him about how important a fullback is. We automatically pencil Andrew Beck in, but I just wonder how important is the fullback to DeMeco and company. Here's what he had to say when I asked him about this earlier on the Zoom.
It's the work that they put in, right?
Hold on just a second. Here you go. Here was DeMeco on the fullback position. Take it away, Coach.
How important is a fullback in this offense? And do you guys feel like in certain situations you might be able to function as an offense without one by using tight ends and other guys in the backfield?
Oh, great question, Landry. I think with that position, right, called the fullback tight end position, right, I think it's very, very flexible, right, and it's dependent upon, right, who you're facing, right, and the defensive structures that you're facing that particular week, and how does it, how do we gain an advantage by utilizing that position, right, to whether it's to create angles in the running game or to create a mismatch in the passing game as well. So it's all predicated on who you're playing that particular week, and does that position provide an advantage for you. So I think there are times, and there are games certainly when you can utilize that position to your advantage.
See, I don't know how important. I don't know how important the fullback is in this offense. I like Andrew Beck. I think he's fine. But do I sit here and think, okay, you have to have Andrew Beck on your roster no matter what? I'm not feeling that. Does that mean that he's not going to be on the roster? I don't know. How healthy is he going to be? But I do anticipate there's going to be times where they don't even have a fullback active, even if there is one available to go. So we'll see what they think about it. DeMeco obviously said that, it's kind of something that you give and take. But that's just kind of really something that I think we automatically pencil in Andrew Beck. And it's like, okay, you're going to use a fullback this percentage of the snaps. Hell, a lot of the time you're going to have Cade Stover blocking or Brevin Jordan blocking. So Is that more valuable than keeping Case Keenum around? Is that more valuable than keeping Steven Sims around? Is that more valuable than keeping someone who can play nickel and special teams for you? That's really one of the things that they're going to have to ask, because I do think that in a perfect world, Cade Stover develops into a guy that they trust blocking out of the backfield. Or Brevin Jordan develops into a guy that they trust blocking out of the backfield. And they're going to ask Dalton Schultz to do that a lot. So it's something that's, I guess, important at times. How important? Don't know. But yeah, the fullback situation is something to keep an eye on, because maybe they don't think it's that important. And maybe one of these guys, whether it's Harrison or whoever else, which, by the way, Jersey Shore. But yeah, I don't know how important the fullback is. We don't know who's going to start off on IR. We also know that the 53-man roster has to be set by Tuesday. We'll go back through. We got some news involving the Texans. We got some rumblings, some rumors involving the Texans again. And we also got a guy might be taking over the squad, and his name ain't Cal McNair. First, though, let's hear from DeMeco Ryans. He met with the media types. Here's what DeMeco had to say. You'll also hear my question about Dameon Pierce. John Mechie, he kind of answered the call. You said you wanted to see him perform in a game. He answered the call. We didn't see Dameon Pierce on Saturday. What do we make of that, Coach? That was a big talking point. Let's hear from Cap, DeMeco Ryans, earlier today on the Zoom.
Upgrading our roster, so I rely heavily on them when it comes to those decisions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Donovan?
Hey, DeMeco. Hope you're doing well. How difficult did you feel like it was this year to judge your wide receiver room? It seemed like a lot of them were really kind of close together as far as how they produce. So how difficult was it this year?
Yeah, we have a really tight wide receiver room, right? It's a lot of good players in that room. A lot of guys made a lot of plays throughout the training camp practices, and also some guys showed up in the games as well. Feel really good about the room that we have. You have of course, the top three guys that we have are all big-time playmakers, but all the other guys have stepped up and made plays at some point, right? And that's a good problem to have, Jonathan. When you have as many guys as we have, it's a really good problem, and I'm definitely excited about the group. I think Coach McDaniel's done a great job of working with that group and getting those guys better, right? Talk about guys like Xavier Hutchinson, just seeing the progress he's made from year one to year two. It's been pretty cool, right, to see his growth, see his development.
Landry?
Morning, Coach.
Morning.
Obviously, y'all haven't had Beck for a large portion of camp. How important is a fullback in this offense? And do you guys feel like in certain situations you might be able to function as an offense without one by using tight ends and other guys in the backfield?
Oh, great question, Landry. I think with that position, right, called the fullback tight end position, right, I think it's very, very flexible, right, and it's dependent upon, right, who you're facing, right, and the defensive structures that you're facing that particular week, and how does it, how do we gain an advantage by utilizing that position, right, to whether it's to create angles in the running game or to create a mismatch in the passing game as well. So it's all predicated on who you're playing that particular week, and does that position provide an advantage for you. So I think there are times, and there are games certainly when you can utilize that position to your advantage.
Cole?
Morning, Coach.
Good
Coach,
morning, Cole.
Just want to get your thoughts on when going into the last stages of roster cuts, do you take into consideration the value of special teams to where maybe somebody can get on the field immediately rather than stow them in the back where they're a depth piece when it comes to those few final decisions of players that you want to keep around for the long term versus players that maybe could find value elsewhere?
Yeah, great question, Cole. That is a huge part in determining, right, guys who make our roster, and that's really that's one of the main determining factors. Like, what's the value of that player on game day, and will that player be up on game day, and what's their special teams role, right? So that's where a lot of players, your backups, right, that's where they fill those roles, and they play a significant amount of time on our special teams. They contribute a lot. Special teams is very important when you talk about the field position, the field position battle and winning that battle, sometimes that's the huge determinant in winning and losing games is that field position battle. So you need guys who can really step up on special teams and not just be, a placeholder as an emergency guy or a depth filler. Like that guy has to add value on our special teams, and our special teams they did a great job last year in all phases of the game. They did a great job, and for us to be a good team, we have to be a good special teams. Or we have to play good special teams for us to win games, and so it's a very important piece to who we keep on the roster and who we do not.
Tim,
Hey, good morning, DeMeco. Question for you. When you start looking at the number of players at each position, do you also take into account like who you might be able to get on a practice squad and all of those things when you make those decisions?
Yeah, thanks, Cam. It's we think about the practice squad for sure, with a lot of young guys, and also with the practice squad being opened up to the 6 veterans who are able to get on the practice squad as well. So that's always, in consideration of guys, and we always want to leave the door open to guys who could potentially, help us on the practice squad because, practice squad, I look at it's a very valuable, it's a valuable 16 guys, and those guys aren't just seen as practice players only. My message has always been that our practice squad guys is, like you can be up like week 2, week 1, you can be up. So you have to get yourself in position and ready to be available to play in the game. You're not just a practice player only, but you're the next man up and you never know when you're needed. So you have to stay ready.
John,
DeMeco, the new quarterback rule for game days as it compares to the practice squad seems to be designed to help a low draft choice or free agent that don't make much money, and you got Case making several million. How do you plan to handle that? Will he be part of the 53, or could you convince him to do the practice squad routine?
Yeah, John, we're still working through that. When it comes to the third quarterback situation, still working through that, and we'll figure that out, tomorrow afternoon.
we have time for a couple more. Go ahead, Sarge.
Coach, how much input do players have in some of the decisions you all make in the roster cuts?
Yeah, the players' input is, what they've done over the past couple months, right? The players' input is their play on the field, like how they've been, in the classroom, like how have they shown the growth, shown that development, like how those guys have grown. Like that's their input. Their film speaks louder than anything they could say. And also just their actions daily and how they show up and prepare for practice, right? How they show up available, right? How they take care of their bodies. So players' input is shown by their actions and what they've done over the past couple months.
And I if you don't mind me asking just a little bit more, I meant like how much would, let's just say CJ Stroud have in saying, hey, look, I have a really good connection with this wide receiver and that wide receiver. When you and Nick go to make those decisions on whether or not to keep him, does CJ's input, is it valued in that?
Oh, yeah, Sarge, I respect the players' input, but, solely at the end of the day, it's myself and Nick. It's our job to create the best roster for the Houston Texans. So, that's why we're here to make those decisions, and me and Nick will work through all of those.
Thank you.
Jonathan.
DeMeco, I was wondering if you had an update on how Will Anderson was coming along and whether you expected him to be ready anytime soon.
Yeah, we'll see where Will is over the next couple of days. Will has been doing really good.
Landry.
You said early in the preseason that you wanted to see Mechie produce in a game, and he obviously answered the call. Does the fact that Dameon Pierce wasn't out there this weekend, does that mean that y'all have seen enough to make whatever decision y'all need to make in the next day or so?
Yeah, our decisions will be made on the roster, guys, over the next couple of days, and you guys will know we still have a lot of things to work through when it comes to the roster. When you talk about those guys specifically, Mechie and Dameon, I think both guys they've done really well in practice settings and also in the game. So both guys I know what those guys are about. I know who they are as people, and so but we'll see you guys will see those decisions here over the next couple of days.
We'll close with Aaron and Kim.
Hey, DeMeco, when you look at the defensive backfield, when you talk about wide receiver, how tough are some of those decisions with some guys that have played for you, played well, and then you have a lot of newcomers and some have not been able to practice as much or play as much in the preseason as probably originally planned. Just your thoughts on kind of where the defensive backfield is. Obviously, you have some really good starters. Thank you.
And when you speak to the defensive back room, it's kind of similar to that wide receiver position. A lot of guys play really well, throughout camp. And you guys know, we spend a lot of time, with these guys, and we see them practice on a day-to-day basis. So you see who guys are, right? We have a lot of guys who's showing up, a lot of guys competing right at the catch point, making plays, showing up on a consistent basis, adding value to our team by showing up on special teams as well. So that's another tight room to crack, that DB room, also the receiver room. But, it's not easy decisions to make, but it's something we have to, me and Nick, we'll get together and make these decisions over the next couple of days.
Kim?
DeMeco, can you just speak to over the last couple of years when they changed the process to where all the cuts are made on one day, what that process is like with you and Nick? 'Cause I know you're also focused on your team throughout camp, but that evaluation process to be ready to see who's out there and available while you're getting your own team together, what that process is like for you guys?
Yeah, great question. I think the process is, first off, it provides guys now, having this one final cut. I think it provides a lot of the young guys, first off, that opportunity to participate in that last preseason game and get more film out there where they wouldn't have had that opportunity based on the previous year's rule. So I like that part of it, where those guys can get more tape and get evaluated by the entire league, right? And then when it comes down to it, right, you will have, over 1,000 players hitting the waiver wire. So it is difficult to try to comb through that. So our scouting staff, those people in those positions, they have to be ready. They have to be ahead of things, kind of thinking ahead on, who can help us, right? And it's a difficult time to really try to add someone else to your roster from another team.
Do you ever, and one final thing, along the way, do you ever hear from them or they say, hey, coach, we've seen such and such, you're busy, but we're keeping an eye on? I mean, do you have conversations about that as well while you're getting your team ready for preseason? Yeah.
Oh, through those conversations, that's Nick, and Nick is doing having most of those conversations. And it goes back to, right, how does the organization work well? And it's with myself being a head coach and Nick as a GM being tied together and in constant communication and always working together on everything that we do. So it has to be, there's a trust factor there. I trust what Nick does and he knows the type of players that we're looking for and the type of players that we're about. So it makes the transition for me, it makes all of the transactions very seamless because of the trust that we have in one another.
Thank you.
Thank you, Coach.
All right, thank you guys. Have a great day.
Swarm. All right, that's DeMeco. Yeah, and I gotta reset the roster. Fisher, I don't know what the hell happened there. But yeah, Blake Fisher obviously important. So we'll go back through the 53 one more time. Where have we made mistakes? Is there anything? Would you keep Sims? Would you keep 3 quarterbacks? Let's go through the exercise one more time. Be sure to swarm the like button as well. And it's spreadsheet time. So we got 2 quarterbacks on the roster. We got Stroud and Mills. No Case Keenum. Could keep Keenum. Don't know. Keeping 4 running backs: Mixon, Akers, Dare, and Pierce. Fullback back. I don't know that you need that. We heard DeMeco answer that question. 6 wide receivers: Diggs, Collins, Dell, Brown, Mechie, and Hutch. I think you have to keep Mechie and Hutch at this point. What does that mean for Robert Woods? What does that mean for Steven Sims? Tight end: Schultz, Jordan, Stover. Keeping 10 offensive linemen. This could be too many. You see Fisher down there. Cam Irving, he's played every position. Broker, who knows? Patterson, Kendrick, Green, and then the starters. And then the DNs, we have Anderson, Hunter, Barnett, Hughes, and Gay. I saw Stutes threw out Hughes as maybe like a surprise cut. That would be a little bit surprising. D-line, Fatukasi, Edwards, Davis, Heinisch, and the streets. You need to be working the streets on that. Linebacker, Harris, Aziz Al-Shair, To'o, Hanson, and Hewitt. Safeties, Ward, Petrie, Murray, Bullock, and Stewart. And then your corners. Now, I do wonder if they maybe want to keep someone just for special teams, and maybe the versatility of Petrie being able to play nickel means that you won't keep as many corners. I know Frank Ross loves Ross, so maybe Ross makes it. And maybe one of these guys starts out hurt, but the cornerback situation is just kind of scary, to be completely honest with you. And then Fairbairn, Townsend, and Weeks. So that's the 53 that we got. Shout out to Blake Fisher. Very, very important on this squad. I don't even think Dare is on the squad just for special teams. I think he's been playing pretty good at running back, and it seems like they kind of trust him very, very much. Couple of rumors on the streets when it involves the Texans. The Starbucks baby reports that John Mechie, there could be teams calling about John Mechie. That's according to the Starbucks baby, Jordan Schultz, who I really don't listen to much that he says. Ever since he said Cal McNair was racist and then deleted the tweet, I don't really put much stock into him. I never really quite did. I just don't. The Starbucks baby doesn't do it for me. So that's what Schultz is saying. The aggregators seem to latch on to what Schultz says. I just don't. I don't put a lot of stock in what he says. If Rossini was saying it, if Aaron Wilson was saying it, if Alexander or DJ Bieneme were, or Schefter or Rappaport, that's fine. This guy could break any story. I'm just not. I'm not into the Starbucks baby and what he says. So just not really my cup of tea. But that's what he says. He says teams are calling about Mechie. Other comments. We can always call Steven Nelson if needed. I think one of your starting corners would have to get hurt for that to happen. I just find it hard to believe Steven Nelson's going to want to be a third corner. I also think they're comfortable with Lassiter on the outside. So, I mean, Steven Nelson, very, very confident guy, very prideful guy. I just find it hard to believe that Steven Nelson's going to come in and be your third corner. Find that very hard to believe. And I think with how the top two guys are performing, I think that would be the situation. And he also kind of criticized the coach and criticized the GM. I would bet against that unless there was just an extreme emergency. Would you be saying this if we had a fullback from the 49ers? No, obviously. Like San Francisco has Kyle Juszczyk. If Kyle Juszczyk were here, yeah, he would be one of the more important pieces of this offense. They don't have that. Andrew Beck, I like him. He's definitely not that. The Blake Fisher thing, my correction there. But yeah, that's pretty much where we're at. I see people talking about CeeDee Lamb getting paid. Yes, he did. Texans, you're almost fortunate to have like the tier of wide receivers the Texans do, where it's like kind of the tier 1B, because as good as the Jeffersons, the Lambs, the Tyreek Hills are, man, that's just a lot of bread. I like where the Texans layout is. It's not always going to be the case because eventually you're going to have to pay these guys. But when I see these contracts, I'm just like, damn, that's a lot of bread. And wide receiver is a position where it seems like every year in the draft now, there's a lot of talent there. So I'm kind of glad the Texans aren't in that tier. Speaking of getting paid, other Texans news here as we have trimmed down the 53-man roster. Derek Stingley is now repped by David Mulugheta. We know David Mulugheta from the Deshaun Watson days. We know him from now representing CJ Stroud. Now he represents Derek Stingley, who will be eligible for an extension next year. So we'll see if Derek Stingley is able to stay healthy. If he does, he's going to get paid. Even if he doesn't, he's probably going to get paid because the talent don't lie. So Derek Stingley, pretty smart move by him. I know Mulugheta was able to get Xavier Howard paid at one point. I mean, you get paid if David Mulugheta represents you. So David Mulugheta now has your quarterback and he has your cornerback, which are two very expensive positions. So there you go. And I do anticipate him trying to get the extension next year. And he's going to, yes, you are right, Andrew. He is definitely going to get some bread. So that's the 53. Apologies on the early Fisher thing. The other question is who starts on IR. I've seen some 53-man roster projections where you're trying to predict who's going to be on IR. And I don't want to do that. I mean, when it happens, then they can adjust accordingly. Guys that I think could benefit from potential IR stints. I think you got to look at Keenum. I think you got to look at Steven Sims. I think you got to look at Robert Woods, and maybe corner. Maybe they keep an extra corner around just because there's so much of a question mark there. And potential guys to be on IR: Beck, Christian Harris, and Noah Brown would be the 3 guys that stick out. So that's where they're at, and that's where they'll figure that whole thing out. So the 53-man roster, it's got to be done by tomorrow. I anticipate there'll be some news coming down. We already have the first array of cuts that the Texans have made. No real surprises. I think the surprises will come tomorrow. And it's going to be interesting. It's going to be really, really interesting to see what they do with this roster. I think the most intriguing names, if you were asking me, and I put this out yesterday at Landry Locker on Twitter. I'm not saying whether there's certainty or uncertainty. I'm just saying it's a big story no matter what the result is. Dameon Pierce, obvious reasons. They've kept him around for a while. We haven't really seen any production in an actual game. We know they like him. Dameon Pierce would be name number 1. Name number 2, Cam Akers. I think he should be on this squad. I don't even think it should be a question. But he would be the next one. Robert Woods, a lot of people anticipated that he wouldn't even make it this far. He has, and you wonder, where does he fit in? Hutchinson, I think he's safe, but obviously pretty intriguing name. Noah Brown, that could be kind of a dark horse. How healthy is Noah Brown? I think he's probably pretty close to being back on the field. Steven Sims, thought maybe return game would be his calling. I think he's on the outside right now looking in. Case Keenum, whether they keep 3 quarterbacks or not, that's obviously a Houston legend. So if Case Keenum gets released, I think that'll be a big story. Does he hang around? Is he a coach? Is he kind of on call? Or do they keep him and give him that 3rd spot? That'll be interesting. Des King, last year we didn't see it coming, but he ended up getting cut, and then they brought him back. Keep an eye on him. He wasn't really playing in the preseason. And then Jerry Hughes, brought him in, you think, because of the situation that they had with Autry. Does Jerry Hughes still have much left in the tank? Kind of seemed like last year was it. There, Ali Gay, I'm intrigued by him. I like his upside. I like the way that he seems to get better as the game goes on and all the experience that he got. And then Kurt Heinisch, man, he just hangs around. Just hangs. I'm not going to count him out, especially with how thin the D-line has been. He's been there. He's been consistent. He's one of the bigger guys. He's been here for a while. So keep an eye on Kurt Heinisch. And I do anticipate that Caserio and DeMeco, they are definitely on the streets trying to figure out if there's some guys that they can bring in and potentially help this ball club get better. And I think they will be pretty active in that for sure. We got a steal of a deal compared to JJ and CD with Nico. I mean, he's not a caliber player. I don't know if it's a steal of a deal. I do like the layout of the receivers, but I think you got about what Nico is compared to those guys, for sure. Nico becomes a superstar this season. I think you got a lot of really good receivers, so that'll be fun to see, for sure. Does Noah Brown start out on IR? Not sure. Seems like he's been. It is unfortunate that last year, the only knock on Noah was he couldn't stay healthy, and now here we are in the preseason. It's already kind of creeping in, so you kind of wonder, is that something they take into account? Do they feel comfortable enough that Hutchinson and Mechie could fill that void for Noah Brown? Or do they look at it as they're going to have to do it anyways because he's not healthy? I think that's something they're going to have to take into account. Probably not a lot of uncertainty for them. I think they probably already have their 53 done. They're probably just trying to figure out, what do we need to do? Where do we need to improve? Where can we look there? But I do have Dameon Pierce making it I do have Hutchinson and Mechie making it. I kept 10 offensive linemen, which might be too much, 5 corners, 5 safeties, and I appreciate everyone for coming through. The news is going to drop throughout the day. I'll pop up whenever big news happens. Like if there's a big cut or a big move or something like that, you guys know that I got you covered. You also know we got the 10:30 show every night, and there's plenty more where that came from. So be sure to subscribe, be sure to like, be sure to ride along, be sure to remember Blake Fisher whenever you're filling out your 53-man roster. And always remember, when it comes to this Texan stuff, we're all in it together. Thanks for coming through the locker room. Fun times ahead. And it's just the start, baby. We're exactly 2 weeks away from reacting to the Indianapolis game. Reaction Monday going to be lit. We got some special stuff in store for you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the Locker Room on YouTube. You know what it is. Let's get it. Hey, Locker Room. Yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk. Yeah, you know what we about to do. Localize every angle's what we really do. We the source, we the pulse of the city too. Landlocked, got the game in the headlock. Localize every time, can't stop, won't stop. Yeah, we top 2 and we not 2.